Hello, everybody. It is Friday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, Assistant Sports Editor for Multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined by Jason Mackey, our Post-Gazette sports columnist, for our weekly chat here on the North Shore Drive podcast. We're going to be talking about guys that we are watching with intent in Week 2, guys who either didn't perform in Week 1 against the Jets or just we didn't see much of them in Week 1 against the Jets. Can the Steelers get more out of them in the week ahead? Later, we're going to talk about Aaron Rodgers, Jalen Ramsey, the early impact they're making on their units, respectively. Before we do, we just want to thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's Edgar Snyder Associates. Law firms come and go, but what law firm has been here in Western PA fighting for injury victims for more than 40 years? It's Edgar Snyder Associates. What firm has a staff of over 130 people who live and work here? It's Edgar Snyder Associates. Law firms come and go, but Edgar Snyder is a name you can always trust. So remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. If you've been hurt in an accident, call them at 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit edgarsnyder.com. They're available 24/7. Jason, we spent a good deal of camp in the preseason talking about Roman Wilson as a breakout candidate receiver for this team. Then he was basically invisible against the Jets. Are you okay with that because the game plan worked, or do you need to see more from him in Week 2 with the Steelers as 3-point favorites against Seattle, according to our friends at FanDuel?
Yes. Sorry, a little bit of a smart aleck answer, but intentionally so. I'm okay with it because it worked. I thought Aaron Rodgers spread the ball around to the people who were open, and if it happens to be Ben Skoranek, so be it. I was really impressed with Calvin Austin. DK Metcalf did basically what I expected him to do. Going forward, long term, is that acceptable? No. And I think that has to be, and I like the title that we created, guys that we're watching in Week 2, but I mean, that's somebody that has to have a different performance in Week 2, Week 3 onward. And I believe Aaron Rodgers said as much this week, but they have to get him more involved after the training camp that he had very high expectations for Roman Wilson. I still do. But they have to find ways to scheme him open. Certainly not going to complain after a win. I mean, if they didn't throw the ball and they had to run it, I would have been fine with it. But I want to see more from Roman Wilson. I want to see more from a couple guys we're going to talk about too today, Adam.
Yeah, I wanted to get to another one. Darnell Washington is a guy we've talked about the tight ends a lot in Arthur Smith's offense, his ability to use 2-3 of them at a time. Saw some Pat Freiermuth, saw some Jonnu Smith, not necessarily in terms of the yardage, but he scored the touchdown, produced on some crucial chain-moving situations, was able to get where the Steelers needed to go. So you give credit to Jonnu Smith for that. But Darnell Washington only played 26 snaps, was not the visible piece of this offense that I think a lot of people would have liked him to be. Do you have a level of concern, or do you also look at it as, look, the guy's the third tight end. If you're looking to him to be like this game-breaking force, like, what are we doing here? I mean, that's kind of where I land. Yes, I think he can be a useful player, especially if you have injuries. I think he can be great in the running game as a blocker. But I think the idea that the third tight end is going to take over games sometimes is just not really practical in my eyes.
Yeah, I think people just want to see more Mount Washington catching passes, man. It's fun. But I agree with you. Like, he's the third tight end. He's the third tight end for a reason. He's not going to supplant Pat Freiermuth or Jonnu Smith. I mean, look at their contracts, for crying out loud. Like, that should tell you everything you need to know right there. Now, can Darnell Washington be used more than 26 snaps? Yes. And do I think he will be this upcoming week? Yes. I look at it almost like, and this isn't like a sexy or exciting answer, but he's going to be needed if Broderick Jones continues to struggle. If Broderick Jones can't win anything one-on-one and you have to keep Aaron Rodgers upright, Darnell Washington's kind of your insurance policy. I don't think anybody's going to get all excited about, oh, there's an extra blocking tight end because the left tackle, the first-round pick, can't hold his own. But that's how I think he gets into the game. Much like Roman Wilson, I'd like to see them target Darnell Washington more. I'm surprised they didn't against the Jets, but be it as it may, I don't know. They didn't exactly struggle to move the ball, so are we really going to sit here and second guess what they did in the passing game? That was one of the probably two best passing games we've seen since Ben Roethlisberger retired. I'm not going to nitpick it. But he's one of those guys, along with Roman Wilson. I think there's a lever the Steelers can pull there, especially in the red zone. I hope he doesn't have to help Broderick Jones on Sunday, although I think he probably will have to if this continues from Broderick. You just got to work him into the passing game a little bit more. And Adam, I'll just finish up with this. Isn't this a good problem to have? It's like talking about too much pitching. We're talking about, oh, this guy's getting targets. This guy's not getting targets. What do we do with this guy? How do we get this guy involved? Not like, yeah, do we really see something out of Van Jefferson here? It might work. So I don't know. I'll take this problem all day long.
Well, and I think with Darnell Washington, there's also a level of I think maybe he's best used as keeping his threat assessment low until the right time. We saw them do that with him at different points last season where he's wide open. The defenses, lose sight of him, and you're basically forcing. If you use him like that, you're forcing other defensive coordinators to say, well, I think they might use him here, but am I going to bet on it considering that they don't use him a ton in the passing game?
Yeah.
I think that makes him dangerous. The idea that defenses aren't going to bet on stopping him and he's going to be open sometimes, maybe for a huge play that they just don't cover him for because they don't expect him to be open. So I don't think you want to abuse that privilege too much, if that makes sense. You mentioned Broderick Jones. What's your level of faith that he can at least get to back to where he was last year at right tackle? This will be a short transition, and maybe I think you and I talked last week about if things go right, he's going to be a guy who's playing at a Pro Bowl level. I think we know he's not quite there yet. So what is,
sure,
where do you want to see him get to that you're going to feel confident leaving him out there and that he doesn't become a weekly discussion point of what's wrong with this offense?
I don't know. Competent NFL starter. Let's go there because he was below that line on Sunday. He was a disaster. And I mean, if I'm Mike Tomlin, I'm trying to walk the line between I'm going to respect the guy that I want to back. I don't want him to lose confidence. I'm not going to bury a first-round pick over one bad game versus, dude, my quarterback's 41 and I can't get him blown up like this. I just can't. I mean, I thought Aaron Rodgers looked pretty good, but he's not going to take an entire season of what happened on Sunday. It's just not going to happen. So if you're Mike Tomlin, you're trying to keep the train on its tracks, but you're also it's a tough dynamic with Broderick Jones is what I'm saying. You don't want to alienate the kid, but he can't play if he continues to play like this. So my level of confidence, frankly, Adam, is a little bit low. I heard Trey Essex on 93.7 The Fan talking about some of his technique. I mean, stuff that you and I will never understand about offensive line play, but Broderick Jones is not meeting that standard. And to boomerang all the way from over here to over there in 5 days, that would be one magical week of practice. So I'm a little worried. That doesn't mean it can't improve. It doesn't mean the Steelers can't scheme ways to get Aaron Rodgers a little bit more protection. Darnell Washington would be the biggest one, but I'm a little worried, man. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's if he's giving up 3 sacks a week, Jason, then yes, it's going to get ugly quick. I just think that's a very low level of play that I think there's nowhere to go but up for him from here. And how far up does it get to where you want to see it? I don't know, but you're not going to play as badly as he did last week most of the time. And I think we've seen that in enough sample size to believe that there's somewhere between here and Pro Bowl that he can get to in relatively short order. So I'm not panicking yet, but I understand why people might be. Jason, one other name I wanted to get to is Payton Wilson. He is a cult favorite. People like to brand him as the next Jack Lambert. I've never quite understood. Listen, I think he can be a good player in the NFL, but there have been a lot of people who rush to anoint this guy the next, great piece in the Steelers linebacker lineage. He was calling himself the best cover linebacker during training camp, famously, and then he got cooked for over 70 yards on just 3 targets. I think people are willing to write off one bad performance, but how quickly is the scrutiny going to mount on him if this continues?
I think very quickly, Adam. I think that the shine is off of that one. And, I don't mind the comments. I want to hear my linebacker say I'm the best coverage linebacker in the NFL or the world or whatever he said. It's a whole separate discussion about the defense. I want that sort of swagger. He did not play well. I think, unlike Broderick Jones, to me, Payton Wilson, that's a one-off. We don't have a lot of evidence of him struggling that badly. Is supporting the running game his ideal usage? No. But he struggled in the passing game, like you said, and he's shown more good than bad in that regard. I don't think he's going to be as out of place as he was or miss the tackles that he did. I was watching Payton Wilson early on. I actually said this to Ray Fittipaldo early on in the game, watching his body language away from plays. Like we saw him during plays, but stuff you see when you're at the stadium, he was walking around like his head was down, just very poor body language all around. And I don't know what was going on. This needs to be a hurdle for Payton Wilson that he figures out. But he was very down on himself early. He needs to learn how to get through that. And if he's not feeling great, if he's not having his best game, whatever, to give them something serviceable. So I'm really curious to see how he responds.
Yes, I am as well. Just considering how many people have such high hopes for him.
I don't need him to be Jack Lambert, but I need him to be better than he was Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, there's people who want to see him in the Pro Bowl. So, I mean, you can't have performances like that and get there. So we'll keep an eye on Payton Wilson. Stay tuned. We're going to get into the next segment here. We're going to talk about Aaron Rodgers and Jalen Ramsey and the impact they're making on their respective units. So stay tuned for that. We will be right back on the other side. Second segment here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Adam Bittner. He's Jason Mackey. We are talking Aaron Rodgers and the impact he's making on the Steelers offense. I'm going to get to Jalen Ramsey in a second. Before we do, we want to thank our sponsor for this segment. It's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci, Pittsburgh's mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers. They've been standing up for victims of mesothelioma and asbestos cancers for over 85 years. They know how to uncover the truth. They have the experience you need and the commitment your family deserves. They've recovered millions for individuals affected by mesothelioma and other cancers due to asbestos exposure. Call them toll-free at 1-877-227-6558 or visit them online at sdklaw.com. Jason, what was the most important change for you with this offense in week one? Was it as simple as Aaron Rodgers knows where the ball needs to go, even if he has, some physical limitations that prevent him from getting there at different times?
Yeah, I mean, the timing of it, the location of it, Aaron Rodgers continues to impress me, Adam. And what we saw on Sunday, and I'll get back to the original point, I swear, his mobility was not great, but as long as you gave him a little bit of time, looked absolutely fine. No, he's not going to take off and scramble. He's going to take some Peyton Manning sacks if there's pressure. I don't care. I'm good with it. But the thing I liked so much about the offense, the biggest change from last year to this one, the ball out quick and the ball out to any person there. I genuinely believe them. Like it sounds like kind of a Mickey Mouse concept when you hear Ben Skoranek say, oh, Aaron Rodgers wants to throw to anybody who's open and we're all important on every route. Like, it sounds rah-rah, but it's true. And we saw it on the Skoranek touchdown. That's the perfect example of what we're talking about here. That play never, ever, ever would have happened with Russell Wilson under center. They're not going to throw to somebody that far down the depth chart over the middle of the field off of play action like that. They just weren't. And I genuinely believe it. And I like what I'm hearing out of Aaron Rodgers this week. He's talking about, I need to get guys more involved. That's on me. My mobility wasn't what I want. He's taking accountability. He's so much different, more something of a leader than Russell Wilson was. And it's not necessarily a knock on Russ. I just thought he was kind of fake and not exactly what this team needs. So all of that rolled into one. I could not feel better or differently about the offense this year compared to last year.
Toxic positivity was the word that I think a lot of people use with Russell Wilson.
I didn't know what that phrase meant until last year, and then I learned.
Yeah, I mean, I can see what people thought, and I know what Russell Wilson was trying to do, but so that sometimes it's just not what people want to hear, and it adds to the level of scrutiny. Jason, when we were setting up the show notes and stuff, you wrote that you asked if we owe Aaron Rodgers an apology for the preseason dialogue. I guess my question is the sustainability. I'm not ready to apologize quite yet. I think it's valid to question a 41-year-old who waited as long as he did to say that he wanted to come in here. for various reasons, valid or not. I think that there were, valid reasons for people to doubt, considering the Russell Wilson experience a year ago and how that went with another veteran guy who you wonder if that Super Bowl winning, that MVP caliber player is still in there. So I guess I'll phrase the question like this to you. How sustainable do you think what Aaron Rodgers is doing right now is as you get into the tougher part of the schedule late in the season, as you look toward the playoffs where you're not going to be trying to beat the Jets, you're going to be trying to beat the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens?
I think it's very sustainable, Adam. Maybe I'm crazy. I see it as sustainable. I don't think Aaron Rodgers, when the weather gets cold or the opponents get tougher, is suddenly going to get stupid. Is the offensive line going to protect him? Totally fair question. I don't have the answer to that. And I can understand why people would be afraid of that after watching what the tackles did on Sunday. I think that's a major factor in the season. We may owe the Steelers an apology when it comes to pass catchers. That's something I think is going to be more opponent-based. Can they get enough production out of their tight ends and wide receivers? We'll see. I like what I saw against the Jets. But my point with Rodgers and what I was texting you, it's more about his arm talent, the idea that he's washed up. Like, I thought Aaron Rodgers was going to come in here and look like, the Tin Man or something from the Wizard of, like, just wouldn't be able to move at all. And I mean, the mobility is limited, yes, but the arm talent is there. And this guy can play quarterback. He can play quarterback if you can block for him. If you would tell me the Steelers have a top 5 offensive line and do an actually good job of protecting him, I'm going to say they have a pretty good year on offense, what I'm looking at with Aaron Rodgers and what we've been looking at since training camp, really. And the other thing that I think is interesting about the, Aaron Rodgers an apology kind of conversation, even if it's just started by me, dude's not a jerk. He's not a weirdo. He's not somebody who's causing division in the locker room. Like, it's the furthest thing from that. These guys have rallied around him. They very clearly like him. I was down there this past Friday. I try to get down there on Fridays because the PG crowd kind of thins out. And I'm watching them joke back and forth with Beanie Bishop, just a random conversation. And he's talking about, building up young players and taking accountability. I like the persona. I like the person that he's been around the Steelers. And I didn't necessarily expect that. So I owe an apology on that front. I was wrong.
We'll continue to monitor that situation. We also want to talk about defense. Jalen Ramsey's kind of been the Aaron Rodgers acquisition on that side of the ball, the big flashy one. Here's my impression, and tell me if you have a different read on it. I think it'd be hard to say Minkah Fitzpatrick didn't play with an edge with the Steelers. I think he was kind of going for that Troy Polamalu mold. In terms of being that quiet but very dangerous force at the safety position. And I understand why the Steelers felt that was something they needed after a decade of Troy and everything he did here. But when I see Jalen Ramsey, I see Joey Porter, I see James Harrison, I see that level of intensity that I think you also need on a defense. So they've essentially traded one for another. How do you feel about the attitude Jalen Ramsey is bringing to this unit?
I'm glad you brought up the Joey Porter, James Harrison kind of comps. Because, obviously they're different players and different skill sets. But, that's kind of what I'm going for. That's kind of what I think the conversation topic is with this guy. There's an intensity there. There's an intensity there that's been missing on this defense. I understand now, seeing it, being a little closer to Jalen Ramsey. He's a very nice guy. But you can see where there's kind of an edge there. Being around him, you hear people talk about how not short, but you can see the why he's a very intense person on the field. And I'm not sure that turns down immediately. And you saw it the end of the half. I love that. He's John. Who knows what's going on? Who knows what he's saying? But it's probably something not very nice. And then he doesn't totally lose his mind. He contains himself a little bit and then makes the play of the game, separating Garrett Wilson from the football. I love seeing guys being able to channel that frustration the right way into a legal, physical hit that helps his team.
Yeah, and I think that's what we saw from him. And I think you see why the Steelers said, yeah, we can move on from an all-pro safety and get a guy who maybe is not an all-pro at corner, but is still very solid and invest our dollars there for the next handful of years. Because I think that was the big question is, you're giving up this piece of your defense. And it, some people felt you were moving the same thing in and sending the same thing out that you're bringing in. I think we're seeing that they're very different players and they bring very different things to a defense.
I couldn't agree more, Adam. I don't see a lot of similarities between Jalen Ramsey and Minkah Fitzpatrick, frankly. I mean, I like the versatility that Jalen brings. I think it's a little bit different than Minkah in that respect. I mean, I think there was a time and place for Minkah to be here, but I mean, I'm going to try to say this nicely. I mean, everything you hear around the Steelers is a lot of the communication issues centered around Minkah Fitzpatrick. There have not been the same sort of concerns or communication issues relative to Jalen Ramsey. If anything, the communication has been greatly improved. And I love the standard that he sets with the intensity. The guy can clearly still play. He can play multiple positions. Maybe we're overreacting here, Adam, but I really like what this guy's brought to the defense. It's an ingredient they need. And I don't think those of us on the outside even recognize that need until we're seeing it here.
Yeah, I think there's some early reason for praise for Omar Khan, Mike Tomlin for being willing to take that risk. We'll see how it turns out, but I think the early returns are promising. But Jason, thank you so much for joining me this week on the North Shore Drive. Always a great conversation. We'll be back next week. I'll also be back Sunday for our Steelers postgame show. So make sure you subscribe to the channel for all of that. Make sure you like this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm, and we will talk to you all again real soon.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.